cleanse your soul. Feel it in your veins. Breathe it in your lungs will stay. It's like love. For the first time, it'll all make sense. You know it. It's like love. Cleanse your soul. Feel it in your veins. Breathe it in your lungs will stay.
बट आप एक काम तो कर सकते हैं, मैं बात करूंगी किससे, विजय से बात करना है, किससे करना है? मैं ये बोल रही हूँ, मैं बात कर लूंगी विजय से।
Hello everyone. So we can start the session now.
Hello. Yeah, you can hear
Mr.
me?
Srinivas can take over now.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity, IACC and and pleasure to have pleasure to moderate the Agritech startup ecosystem. What we're going to cover basically is looking at three aspects of the overall Agritech ecosystem that is coming up in India, and then look at what possible collaborations can happen between India and Australia in terms of technology and look in the entire Agritech ecosystem. Just to give a background, I think the Agritech ecosystem has picked up space in the last 3-4 years. We have more than 1,000 startups, agri startups, across the value chain from the farm side to the output side, including infrastructure, picking up white spaces wherever they see opportunities. We got a lot of traction in terms of funding, early seed funding, early growth stage funding. More than $500 million has gone into into actually promoting this ecosystem in the last 3-4 years. The government also has put a lot of trust in terms of actually enabling the Agritech ecosystem do the ground level transformation initiatives. So a lot of positive signs. In fact, last year, the past year where the COVID has happened, the Agritech ecosystem in terms of the growth and the pace has significantly further improved. Looking at that background, I think we have a good panel from different segments. Mr. Keswan actually leads he's a group president for alliances and partnerships with TAFE, and he has immense experience in terms of both having the views on the Agritech ecosystem, and also has insights into what the government is thinking. So we'll have good inputs from him. We have Hemendra who actually comes from Bharat Innovation Fund. He's a venture partner there, and he actually has a lot of experience in actually facilitating the incubation of these Agritech startups and also enabling them grow. Good to have you, Hemendra. We have John Southwell. I think we can actually. He's a counselor in agriculture in the Agricultural Australian High Commission in India. John, I think pleasure to have you here. We can actually look at looking at exploring possible because Agritech again in Australia has immense focus. We have seen a lot of innovative technologies there. I think we can actually pick up your thoughts in terms of how do you bring in those innovations there that is happening in Australia in terms of what is doing as well in terms of the ecosystem there. Fairly advanced there, so we can pick your thoughts in terms of how do you bring that to the table. Look at collaborative opportunities between India and Australia, and both from the private sector and the government sector. Yeah. We have Parul Agi again. I see her bridging the gap in terms of digital solutions into a SaaS model. So Parul, we would like to pick your thoughts again on how do you bring in technology, looking at actually implementing those technologies on the ground, more from a SaaS model. I looked at the profile that you guys have, so happy to have you here. So we have a good panel. With that, I think I would actually start with three areas we would like to cover. One is the business models. They're emerging as of now. There's no particular success story or this all in the evolution stage. So picking up the business model, Mr. Keswan, would you like to throw some light in terms of the business models that are emerging in the farm mechanization space, particularly on tractorization and look at uberization in the farm mechanization space? What kind of business models that you see will become viable, and what are the white spaces still you see in the business models which you might want to look as potential opportunities for the startups in India?
Okay. See, as far as the agricultural mechanization, I think that has been a very specific question. What is the areas of agricultural startups in the agricultural mechanization? See, for me, in agricultural mechanization, the startups can actually work in a service provider model, because it's very much necessary today. If you really look at in India, a service provider as far as the mechanization is concerned is very limited, and it is limited to the so-called custom hiring centers run by the government. But for me, these are not the kind of models which will really go a long way, because see, the question here is, unless there is a thrust to do things differently, I don't think the agricultural mechanization service models are going to work. Let me explain this, why I'm talking about. See, let me look at the traditional one, and then I'm going to look at what can be the future. See, traditional is the tractor, the implements, and the equipments, etc., has to be utilized. And the biggest issue here, what happens is that the so-called command area for a tractor and implement requirement cannot really exceed around 10 to 15 circle kilometers. The reason why it is happening, because beyond this, if you have to really move the tractor or implement or equipment, the cost of moving it is much more. Number one. Number two, the people who have this, they try to do it. They are not very keen to hire drivers, etc., because of their experience, what they have. So everything is becoming something. If I have spare capacity, and if one of my family members are willing to drive it around and give the availability, I'm happy to give. This is one issue. The second issue is even today, if you look at India, there are about 9 crores of farmers. Out of that, many are below the poverty line farmers. The trouble in the below the poverty line farmers is, even if you set up a custom hiring center, even you set up a way of giving them mechanization, nobody is willing to give them mechanization because they are not able to pay for the mechanization. It is sad situation. So this we have taken it to the government separately. So there is another intervention required by government. What we requested that do it as lend to rent. In other words, give the poor farmers some kind of a DBT, so that after when they rent an equipment, that equipment payment is actually borne by the government. There is a provision in SMAM to do it. So this is the second issue. This is the traditional scenario. I'm leaving like that. The third traditional scenario, what we are having is that there are about close to 50 lakh of tractors in the country, and close to, as I said, 9 crores of farmers. And out of that, at least 5 to 6 crores will be definitely looking for hiring it. There has been no mechanism of linking these two people up. Okay, from TAFE's side, we have done that on a CSR basis, and today we have close to 25 lakh farmers on that, so that any farmer can talk to any. It's not it's not a Uber model. I'll probably call it a Tinder model, so that what really happens is, if you are a lender, in the next 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers circle, how many people want the equipment. And if you are a hirer, you know that how many renters are there around you. Thereafter, they talk to each other. We don't do anything. But it has been a very, very encouraging model, because we did this even during the COVID period. And we found that this has really helped a lot to get mechanization. So that much for the existing models. I think where the big opening is going to come up will be in the supply in the services like drone services, which can be very much the modern way of looking at things, which will cut down the cost of fertilizing, the cost of putting insecticides and pesticides. Second thing is going to be the smart agriculture with respect to sensing and other mechanisms. All this can be a service model wherein movement of these things from place to place is not expensive compared to the value or a quantum of service you are going to do. So this is another area I think is going to change. It can be algorithm with respect to artificial intelligence and giving the right kind of advice to farmers with respect to the pest infection, etc. in that. And all this can be done on a much smaller scale. And a lot of artificial learning, AI can happen, because within India, you will be able to create clear learnings, so that from place to place, you will be able to understand what is happening, what kind of pests are coming, what are the symptoms and the pre-symptoms of the pest infection. So what can be done? This can be a great area in which the agricultural startups can really start working. I know a lot of people are working on this area. Last but not the least will be the precision agricultural implements, which need not be the traditional implements. What I call as a swarm kind of an implements, so that a lot of small implements work together, whether it is a 1 acre farm or a 10 acre farm, and all things will be interconnected. There will be one person will be still controlling it, because I don't think totally autonomous may not be the way India will be going. And this is one area I think a lot of scope will be there. I know people have started this from the simple things like weeders, where a lot of manual and menial work is going on. People, it's a very that drudgery nobody wants to do. So I think this is one more area where there's a huge scope of service. So this is where I'm going to stop, and I would love to hear others in this area thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kishan. Those are good thoughts. Hemendra, you have a view overall across the value chain while you work with startups, right? You mentor them, you build those scalable models with them. What thoughts you would have in terms of the overall ecosystem, how it's emerging, what business models you believe are scalable? There are a lot of always a question in terms of B2C versus B2B in among startups, right? You start with the B2C model, a lot of people move to B2B because the payer is not there, right? So what is your experience, and what do you believe the Indian ecosystem, startup ecosystem, is moving towards?
Thanks, Srinivas, and thanks AICC for this opportunity. First of all, to your question, Srinivas, in particular, the kind of business models which are emerging now in Indian Agritech, I will probably put them in, let's say, 5 to 6 buckets. The first and foremost, which I call it low hanging, is essentially building farmer access to markets. So we call it farm to fork, and given the fact that the food value chain has multiple layers, it's complex, it's not very transparent. A lot of these startups are building tech-enabled supply chain, which is essentially demand-driven than supply-driven, and the demand is aggregated from the modern trade, from consumers like you and me, from HoReCa, from institutional buyers. So I think this is one theme which is picked up quite significantly in the last few years. There are players like Paycool, NinjaCart, Kamartan, Dehat, who's doing a significant volume connecting farmers to the market. And we are already seeing some bit of specialization happening. A lot of startups started with staples, some startups started with fruits and vegetables. But we are seeing more and more focus coming in this space. So we have startups which are, let's say, focused on spices now. There's startups which are focused on building value chain for silk. There's startups who are building such models for eggs. So, we are seeing some bit of specialization in this farm to fork model. The second one is what I call factory to farm, which is essentially enabling access of agricultural inputs to the farmers. Which is primarily dominated by seeds, agrochemicals, in some cases fertilizers, micronutrients, some machineries, hand tools, and other products which are required by the farmers for farming. The interesting thing about this model that these are not vanilla models of selling to farmers. There's a lot goes into it, which is essentially building diagnostics around the soil and the crop, and figuring out what each and every farm needs, and building your product mix and your advisory on the basis of that, and delivering that product to the farmer on his at his doorstep. So there's an element of prescriptive selling, there's an element of last mile access to farmer, and there's also an element of credit, because a lot of inputs in India are sold on credit. So I think all these pieces have to come together for the agri-input e-com models to scale. There are, of course, more than a dozen models which have scaled at a state level or a regional level, like some Gramophone or AgroStar or a Big Heart or a Better Zindagi. But for them to scale further, I think the ecosystem has to mature a little bit more to make that happen. The third, which is emerging, and I feel very bullish about it, is what I call agri-fintech, which is essentially enabling access of institutional credit to farmers. As we know, 70% of India's farmer still borrow from informal sources, and the cost of capital is humongously high there, right? Which kind of adversely impact the farm economics. So I think those are the models which need a lot of attention, and it's not going to happen without participation from mainstream banks. I think the whole PSL lending has to be seen in a very, very different way to make that happen, right? So, but having said that, there are startups who are doing some interesting work on farmer onboarding, farmer KYC, credit scoring models, risk assessment models, risk mitigation models, and loan recovery. So, again, I would say the way this ecosystem stands, a lot of these things are broken. They need to come together, and I would say the mainstream banks have to participate if we take the solution to large number of farmers. The fourth one, which is very common, is around data and advisory, collecting data from, as Keswal sir was also mentioning, using drones, using satellite imagery, mobile phones, sensors, and IoT, and building algorithms for advising to farmers. So typically, those algorithms data points which can help farmers to make decisions, and not just farmers, even the value chain. Someone lending to farmers, someone buying from farmers. These models have worked well from a subscription perspective with large farmers, with orchard owners. But as you were mentioning, B2B versus direct to farmers, the challenge is most small farmers don't have money to pay for subscription unless they see the clear benefit. That's why a lot of these models still B2B. Of course, more scale they become direct to farm also. And a lot of these data centric models are also realizing the need to integrate value chain, the input side, the output side for scale. So I think that's another element. If you are pure data or pure tech model, the only other way to scale is go global. I think that is another theme that we are witnessing now. More and more Indian agtech startup, particularly on the pure tech and the data side, exploring global markets, including ASEAN, including Africa, including parts of Europe as well. So I think that's also a theme to watch out for. Another theme is more around controlled agriculture. We are seeing more and more farm management solution. We are seeing a lot of application of hydroponics and aquaponics, which is ultimately leading to building more like hyper local supply chains, with in some cases with a direct to consumer sort of channel as well. So early days for these startups, but I think it has started, and I see a lot of pickup in time to come. Last but not the least, solutions for livestock. I think there's enough potential there as well in terms of digitizing value chain for dairy, for aqua, for fisheries. Of course, these part of the agri ecosystem is probably more mature and more organized as compared to, let's say, fresh produce, fruits and vegetables, staples. But having said there's a huge need for digitization, which can help the livestock farmers to get credit, to get better access to markets for value addition. So I would say these are like maybe 4 or 5 key themes which are emerging, and I will still say it's early days. The whole ecosystem is about 3 to 4 years old, and lot to be done in terms of demonstration of scale and benefit to farmers. But we are seeing the green shoots.
Yeah, thanks, Amendra. I think that's a good overview in terms of the overall agri-tech ecosystem that is developing across the value chain. Coming to Parul, I think you guys have a model where you are actually taking the solutions to the field and actually implementing through drone technology and stuff. So, any thought there in terms of what business models does the SaaS model will work, because there's a blending of technology and agri technology plus ICT technology, right? or whatever technology we're talking about, right? It's a blending of both sides, right? So do you see SaaS models emerging in India and the user recognizing it? You're on mute, Parul. We can't hear you. I don't know. We can't hear you. I think there may be some challenge. I don't know whether the moderator, the support team issue. Yeah, now I think.
If you use the headphone, sometimes your computer directs the speaker onto the headphone and creates problems. So you have to choose it.
Not able to hear you at all. You can hear us?
No, she is muted.
Yeah, she's muted. Yeah.
Hello? No, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you. Okay, so we'll come to you, Parul. I think if we can resolve it, we'll come to so you again. So John, bringing back, I think you've seen what is happening on the Indian agri-tech ecosystem space. And Australia has been a pioneer in actually creating the entire or pushing the agri-tech ecosystem, promoting innovation, funding, government playing active role in terms of recognizing innovation. The IPR regime is very strong in Australia. So what are your thoughts? How do you think the Indian agri-tech ecosystem is emerging, can collaborate with the Australian ecosystem? That is all.
Thank you, Srinivas, and namaskar, all my friends in India. Keshavan, it's great to see you again. Hemendra as well, and Parul, I don't think we've met before. I think probably one thing that I'd note is that the innovations that have been learnt through COVID-19, I'm actually at this moment sitting in Canberra in Australia, and it's through innovations like these. I'm back here on some personal leave. It's through innovations like these that we can actually have this transcontinental discussion about this subject. And the other observation that I would make, Srinivas, before getting into the rub of your question, is that farmers across the world are really the original innovators. The more nourishment and the better that you look after the soil, the more it will be productive. Similar with animal husbandry and in a number of other areas as well. So if you don't take care of the land, there's less productivity as well. So one would say that ever since many more years before computers were invented, farmers were actually the original innovators into the market. From Australia's perspective, we're home to over 15 ag tech and food tech innovators and accelerators, spanning urban, regional and rural centres, and it's underpinned by a unique mix of corporate research and government sponsors. Our agricultural sector is one of the least subsidised in the world, and our competitiveness as a global producer and exporter of food is testament to the innovation and resilience of Australian farmers, as well as the depth, quality and connectivity of research organisations with industry. Universities, our Commonwealth Science and Industrial Research Organisation, food producers and industry groups, including our network of 15 rural research and development corporations, and Food Innovation Australia frequently collaborate to develop groundbreaking solutions to global challenges. And might I note that a number of the things that we experience in Australia are also things which are experienced by Indian farmers as well. Water scarcity, variable climates, and also the absolute desire to get the most out of our land, and also ensuring that we're able to feed people not only within our own country, but also exports around the world to contribute to global food security. I might stop there and hand back to you, Srinivas, as a broad thing. And I suppose the main point that I would say is that you need to have a unique mix of government, industry, agricultural, and also research working together to ensure that each area plays to its strengths, and also that you are not double handling and making the most out of every dollar or rupee that is put into the system.
Thank you, John. I think fairly said. Parul, is it resolved from your end now? Can you check?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, better, quite better. Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I was just saying we are just filling that gap between the technology and the farmers. So we are working on drone technology as of now. We are providing drone as a service for the farmers for the pesticides, insecticides, and fertilizer spray kind of thing. So right now, like we are operating in 4 states in India. We are operating in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka, and Himachal. Also, we have occupied a few areas there. So yeah, like as Mr. Hemendra has said that, there is a lot of scope in scaling up and all those things. But the main problem right now is changing the mindset, because farmers in India, like they are already under BPL, and Moreover, they are not ready to adopt the technologies because they think the methods they are using from last 40-50 years, they are more productive, and they are like they are happy with those methods, though it's like life taking threats are there with the use of pesticides. When they are doing it manually, they are inhaling a lot of pesticides. So right now, like a lot of people, progressive farmers are coming up, and they are like this mindset is changing. In last 2 months we have already covered around 5,000 acres across these 4 states to spray all the pesticides, and we are also spraying these bioliquids for the increase in yield. And we are, along with the spraying, we are doing the yield estimation, acreage estimation, especially for the cash crops. Like we are working with vineyards just to know whether what if there are any disease pattern coming up in the crops, so that they can take the precautionary measures instead of regretting it later. So these are the solutions we are providing right now. And apart from that, we are also providing like on the multispectral hand itself, we are providing the solutions at the global level as well. Now we are planning to scale up to Malaysia and few other, like in Australia again, we are talking to few agriculture departments to scale up this technology on the agriculture front. So these are the technologies right now we are providing. In India, it will take little time for the multispectral analysis, especially because the farmers here are poor, and moreover, they are not ready to accept this technology. They are happy with the methods, as I already mentioned. They are happy with the methods they are already using. But now we are talking to few corporates where the productivity really matters. Like especially as I mentioned, the vineyards, and for the cash crops like cashew, saffron, those kind of things we are working on right now. So these
Okay.
are the kind of gaps we're trying to fill.
Thank you, Parul. I'll bring in Keshwan again, sir. Sir, you have been in touch with government on a very proactive basis, right? Do you think the government has done enough? Because we lost last when you look at the last 7-8 months, you have seen a lot of policy initiatives, right? You have reforms, you have stimulus packages, you have a lot of focus in terms of value chain development in agriculture and elite sectors. So, do you think the ground level implementation and the strategy that they're forming up will actually promote the agritech ecosystem to actually see whatever transformation results that we want to look at, or they have to do much more than what they've done?
See, when I look at the government initiatives, what they have done, genuinely, I believe that they have done a lot of policy initiatives so that many of the barriers which were created for time immemorial, not today. I think some of them are not today's problem. It is time immemorial, right from our post our independence. We created the farmers as a protective species, and so we kept a lot of barriers and barricade, thinking that we are protecting them. But what people tend to forget is when I create a barricade for somebody, it also prevents him from coming out and taking advantage of freedom. I think definitely government, what has they have done is they opened up the ecosystem. There is no doubt about it. There is much more to be done, because where I think the gaps are still forming, which you also know from what you read in the newspapers, is that see, there has to be a standard operating system what they need to follow. See, creating a rules and opening up doors is very different compared to actually making it happen on the ground. Yeah, you know very well that in India the agriculture falls between the state, center, and many ministries. At least I can count 10 ministries in the center where the agriculture falls in between. So there is definitely a need to create a policy level, one more initiative, which I think we have been talking quite a bit. Even in the FICCI front, we talked about it. We have put it up to recently when the Supreme Court advisors talked to me, I told them this is one way you can actually come out of the current problems, is that create an agricultural council very similar to a GST council. My argument there for the Supreme Court appointed advisor are, look, if you can come to a reasonably a good conclusion on how to share taxes. So I mean the equivalent, getting the state and center to agree that there is some kind of equitability in that sharing taxes. Don't you think it will be easier to share the prosperity if you bring all the people together, and this is going to lead to prosperity? I think that's where the gap is. I'm not going to talk specifically on startups, because see, many startups, I don't think they are really going to work right away across the state borders. I think many startups are working within the states. So I don't think there is a basic issue with respect to them. There is a reasonable amount of openness which has happened to the startup, and there is a lot of encouragement. The government also wants to do startups. And I don't know if you have looked at the government hackathons which came under the PM's purview. PM said that let us create a hackathon for agri startups. So a lot of work is being done. So I'm not worried about that. See, they created an open space, but it's going some more time to get these things. That's why I think I go back to Hemendra. See, startup started only about 4 years back. The government started pitching in only less than a year back. I think we need time. Srinivas, I think you don't have a choice, but it will happen. Surely it will happen.
Yeah, thank you, Keshwan. Hemendra, coming back to you, the current ecosystem, right? The Agritech ecosystem focuses more on bridging the gap, right? So, like whatever solutions we talked about, all the 5, 6 that you actually referred, were more about connecting whatever, right? In the input ecosystem, the output ecosystem, the advisory platform. But unless and until we actually all these Agritech startups look at some kind of value addition in terms of the stakeholders who are using it. Whether it is productivity enhancement on the farm side, whether it is cost reduction on the value chain side, the successful or the scalability and the adoption might be a big challenge. So how do you see that getting addressed, Hemendra?
Yeah, that's an important point you raised, Srinivas. I see value addition as a very critical component. And if you look at all the farm to fork models, still I would say 80% or more than 80% is buying from farmers and selling to someone, right? And that's why the gross margins looks a little low. In staples it's usually single digit, and fresh produce it is double digit, but there's a lot of wastage and loss which happen in the supply chain, which makes the sustainability of this model a question mark. So clearly there's a huge role for value addition. To me, ideally value addition near farm. And if you talk about Indian agricultural supply chain, I would say value addition could be even in terms of storage. For example, if you look at our warehousing in India, most of it is catering to the processors and the traders and the large farmers, right? Small farmer with 5 bags of wheat or a paddy, they don't even get an entry into warehouses. So can we create some bit of micro warehousing near farm? And if farmer has the choice to store for 2 months, 4 months with an ability to get loan for that, I think that creates a lot of value for the farmer and also for any startup who's working on it. Second is micro processing. I think that is another area where of course, there's a lot of processing capacity in India. In fact, more than probably what we need. And of course, it is scattered across locations, but I think there is a need for taking processing closer to farm, which is essentially around, let's say, very primary processing, sorting, grading, packing. I think is a very, very basic form of processing which can be done near farm. Processing like dehydration, processing let's say in case of spices, grinding and pulverization. If you start doing these kind of processing at farm, what happens is shelf life of the produce goes up, your logistics costs get optimized, and very importantly, if farmer is a participant in this process, either the farmer himself or let's say micro entrepreneurs in the rural areas who can probably be part of some of these infrastructure which gets created near farm, it's a huge employment multiplier. So I think that's one area which I think is still very nascent from a startup perspective and also from an ecosystem perspective. And I think it's a win-win because startups will gain because they can create more entry barriers. They can definitely improve their margins. And once the farmer becomes a participant in value addition, I think that is one of the biggest challenges that I see in Indian agriculture. When we talk of doubling farmer income, it's not going to come by increasing productivity alone. It's going to come by how do we partner with farmers in the supply chain. And I always give example of Fonterra, which is one of the largest dairy company in the world. Farmers are the owners of the company, right? So it's not just they're selling milk to the company, but they're creating wealth for themselves and they can retire with some money in the bank, right? I think we don't have those many those examples in India. Of course, we started farmer producer organization, and it's very early. But even I would say that currently the whole focus of FPO is buying inputs together and selling produce together. The element of value addition, the element of creating a distribution, a marketing, a brand, is entirely missing, right? And that's why we see these challenges. What we are seeing now. So I think that is one area where I see the agri-tech community, of course, can add a lot of value because they are more entrepreneurial and they can build these models. But I do see a need for policy here, and I think Kesman sir was referring to it. We need to build more physical and digital infrastructure, I think, for this model to scale. There is AI fund which was announced by the government of India, which is essentially providing loans at a cheaper cost for building these kind of facilities. I think that is one step in the right direction. Building a digital infrastructure will also help financing these kind of models in a more efficient way. So I think that's also equally important. And then intervention from the local government, participation from FPOs, Krishi Vigyan Kendras, universities, food institutes, research institutes to bring those technologies to farm. I think there's a role for those kind of interventions to happen to really drive these models at scale. I think that can change things a lot. I think one example which I want to quote before I close is Sahyadri Farms in Nasik, which has been able to do a lot of it, being an FPO, and they've created a business of the size of 250 crores already, with lot of elements of the value chain being promoted and captured by the FPO itself. So I think these are the models we should be looking at rather than just treating farmers as producers. How can we treat them as part of the value chain, an integral value chain, taking products right up to the market with farmer getting a fairly good share of the end consumer price. Right now it's about 30-35% for most products. Can we increase that share to 50%, 60%? I think that's where the opportunity lies.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, John, Australia has a lot of capability in terms of grain management, right? So you have been one of the most efficient grain management countries, right? Overall, in terms of across the supply chain from production to the consumption. What kind of opportunities you see from Australian technology players, not only from Agritech perspective, but it's also from the grain management technology, which can blend with IT and ICT at all together. So, what kind of opportunity you see, and then what kind of models? Or is it G2G partnership or private to private partnership or G2? So, can you throw light in terms of how do we embrace the maturity of Australian technologies to India?
Thank you, Srinivas. And I was very pleased to be involved last year. There was the agreement to a comprehensive strategic partnership between Australia and India at the Virtual Leaders Summit between Honourable Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Honourable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. And part of that actually included recognition that agriculture is a cornerstone of both of our economies, and that as part of that there would be the intent of exploring a partnership on grains, which would assist India in reducing post-harvest losses and ensure good returns to the farm gate. Especially in the context of supply chain disruptions, such as what we saw last year and possibly even currently with COVID-19. So that is something which we are doing both on a government-to-government, but also we are working on a industry-to-industry pitch to ensure that the knowledge and expertise that we have from our grain sector can potentially be applied in the Indian context. Noting obviously that there are key differences between the Australian and Indian grain sectors. An Australian grain farm can be up to thousands of hectares in size, whereas India sizes are much smaller. But having said that, there are a lot of opportunities, such as in farmer producer organisations, as well as the most recent agricultural reforms, which we note are a subject of some discussion in India, that can potentially all create a great ecosystem for outward and inbound investment. Might I just point out also that something that Hemendra was saying around the ability of you'll have your big corporates that undertake R&D and extension, but then what happens with the I guess the small farmer and the small FPOs? One of the systems that we have in Australia is that our network of research and development corporations, of which there are 15, which go across a number of commodities, including eggs, wool, dairy, sugar, meat, wine, cotton, fish, and grains, and there are others, are basically companies which are set up either under government purview or under industry purview. And it actually solves a number of significant and related issues that would otherwise reduce the money available for rural research and development and consequent innovation and extension. And how this is funded is through the application of levy on certain sales. So, say, for example, the transaction that I might make in selling my grain to a marketer, which then goes into a central pool of funds which funds research and development, which is then also matched by the government for research and development purposes. Now, that system means that our rural industries are generally made up of a large number of reasonably small enterprises that are not in a position to make their own investments in R&D. And even if they could, this approach would actually likely result in severe duplication of effort and tie up lots of resources and reduce the overall gains made. And so with this RD&E funding, half of it, of which in 2014, 2015 was around 3.3 billion Australian dollars, and I just can't quite do the conversion in my head at the moment, but I think Australian dollar to the rupee is about 50 rupees at the moment. Just over half of that funding was provided by the public sector, mostly the Commonwealth, and then state and territory governments and universities. And that has meant that for every dollar that the government invests in agriculture R&D, there is a $12 return on investment over 10 years. So it actually means pooling of resources for the benefit of industry. And the best thing about this system, in my view, is that the decisions on investment and research are made by industry. The government doesn't get involved.
Okay.
So as a result, you have farmers and industry bodies actually saying, this is what we need for our industry. Because the best people that can actually say what they need are the people who are actually growing the thing themselves.
And that's a great, I think, thought, I think, John. Yeah, so Parul, coming back to you. Have you like what Hemendra was saying in terms of partnering with the farmer in terms of value sharing, right? Once you implement SaaS model, did you in your actually last one or couple of years when you have actually rolled out this startup? Have you experimented such kind of models where you actually identifying what value loss you are saving, and then you can partnering with the farming community, look at sharing the value? Or do you see the potential there in terms of creating that model?
Yeah, definitely there's a potential. So we have not implemented this model yet because we are collecting the data as of now, because we need a lot of data for the prediction models and for this data analysis overall. This is all complete AI and machine learning. So now what's happening is the cost saving definitely we have done for them, especially on the spray side, because if I'll talk about the South Indian states, the average cost they are spending over spraying per acre, it's around like $1,000. Because there is a lack of manual labor availability and other factors as well. Now we are charging like almost 60% of it here. And so they are saving a lot of cost on the spray, on the manual front, and time saving is there, water saving is there. So like it's well-known situation in South India that there is a huge lack of water resources available. Now what's happening here is when we are doing the spray manually, so they are using almost 100 liters an acre. So they'll mix the chemical ratio and the water ratio, it's around like 2 liters of chemical along with 100 liters of water. Now what we are doing is 2 liters of chemical along with just 10 liters of water, because we are spraying concentrated solution. There is a time saving there, and on an average they are covering around 2 to 2.5 acres with 3 people, and on an average we are covering around 30 to 40 acres a day. So definitely there is a time saving, water saving, and the cost saving on all the fronts. Revenue sharing, we are yet to implement this model. Definitely for that model we are working with corporates for this data analysis, because on the B2C level it's very difficult to convince the farmers that they can use this technology. It will save, as like farmers here are not very educated in India. Now when we are working with corporates like Mahindra is there, then Nestle is there, so they have huge farm holdings in India, they do contract farming. So we are already talking to them for their vineyards, for their other potato farms and all, where we can do these prediction models for the acreage estimation and for the disease predictions. So these kind of things we are coming up for the revenue sharing purpose. Where
Thank you,
if we can
Parul.
save, let's say, 60% of yield, then like we can do some revenue sharing for that.
Understood. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hemendra, coming back to most of the startups have a problem in terms of accessing data, right? So they're actually capturing data. They're putting a lot of effort to capture the data. We don't have an agri stack in India, right? Like for example, USDA in US has an agri stack, right? So they have captured everything from soil to climate to water to productivity, right? So do you think there's a need for creating agri stack in India so that the Agritech startup ecosystem can benefit out of it, and then the leap of growth can happen, because you're not investing in data, but you're actually investing in analytics and then building solutions around it.
Oh, absolutely. I think not just from a startup perspective, I think the whole industry need an agri stack. For example, if SBI is giving a loan of 50,000 rupees to a farmer, and if his cost of access and cost of recovery is, let's say, 5,000 rupees, he's not going to lend, right? The economics doesn't work. So that cost of access has to be brought down to like 50 bucks, 100 bucks, right? And that's not going to happen without a digital access. So clearly, I don't think it's just the startups. I think everyone needs it. Government needs it for direct benefit transfer, for farmer welfare schemes, and a lot of stuff. I think state governments needs it. Agri input companies who want to sell the inputs to farmers, they need it. Processing company needs it. So I think there's definitely a need for creating agri stack, and fortunately, there is a lot of buy-in at the central government level as well as at the state government level. And the work is already started. The Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of IT and Electronics are working on it. It's called IDEA, India Digital Ecosystem for Agriculture. So I think the efforts are on. But I think what is needed and where I want startups to participate is to create pilots, likes of Parul and, I'm sure there are a lot of players who are already building these mini stacks in different parts of the country and across different crops. And I think agri stack is going to be slightly more complex than India stack, because it is rural. B, it is dynamic. The crops change, the farm boundaries change, right? So there's an element of dynamicity, right? So I think, to me, in my mind, it is, in terms of architecture, it is more like creating an identity for each farm and linking that identity with a farmer identity, which could be his Aadhaar number or something else. And once you have this basic string ready, you can, who the farmer is, where is he located, and you can also figure out what crop is he growing and things like that. And on that, you can build multiple data layers, as you were mentioning, the soil nutrition layer, the soil water stress, soil moisture layer, the mandi layer, a farmer's access to mandis, right? The weather layer. So you can start building a lot of layers, data layers, once you have the basic agri stack in place. And I think the best part which it can do for the startup ecosystem is open it up for innovations, for building APIs. What fintech did, the whole fintech revolution, I think, is credit to India Stack and the JM Trinity. We wouldn't have seen so many fintechs operating without that public platform in place. So I think that is what AgriStack can do to Agritech by making it open source and enabling these startups. I'm sure if there are 1,000 startups today, there'll be 10,000 if we have an operating AgriStack in place. and the number of APIs you can create for logistics, for aggregation, for processing, for farmer connect with markets, for letting farmer know what the prices are ruling in various mandis. I think it's a huge potential area. I think it can really transform the agriculture for good. So yeah, I think we should prioritize. I'm sure the government is working for it, but I think there's a role for startup to take it to the proof of concept level. Demonstrate it in 10,000 farmers, 100,000 farmers, and learn from that, and integrate those learnings while we are building a pan India Agritech, which essentially I think is to be driven by the government.
Thanks, Hemendra. John, do we have any experience in Australia where we have built Agritech and India actually is in the stage of or in the stage of building up this Agritech? Any experience sharing that we can happen between India and Australia in building this stack?
Building Agritech. So yes, there are. I guess in a lot of respects, information about sort of current market conditions and also outlook as well. Because, say for example, if I'm planting a crop today, I want to know what the forecast is going to be in 6 months' time, rather than what it's going to be tomorrow. I can't plant a crop when I know it's going to be a good price tomorrow. I need to know what's happening in 6 months' time once it's actually grown. And so we have our Australian Bureau of Agricultural Resource Economics and Sciences, which undertakes a number of forecasting, which is our public agricultural forecaster. And then obviously we have our other big companies which have their own forecasting as well. And I'd say that ABARES is probably similar, I guess, in some scopes to the Directorate of Agricultural Economic Statistics headed up within the Ministry of Agriculture in India. But at more grassroots level, there are a number of companies in Australia that do pass on information about current prices that is much more quicker and to the button. And that is very much done because of the ability of our place to actually have, I guess, less stringent marketing laws than probably are there in India. And I can probably say that with our, the way that our market is regulated here in Australia, actually has increased our competitiveness. And that's why we note, the reforms in India as being a potential to create this sort of, and also allow for much greater electronic trading. We absolutely commend things such as the ENAM system and also agri-stacks that have been created around the place.
Yeah, thank you, John. Last, I think I'll take one more and then we can wrap up. Mr. Keswan, one thing that most of the focus has been, government has been looking at crop diversification. The penetration of crop diversification as a strategy has not worked in Punjab and Haryana too. I'm saying a lot of focus is there, but it's not happening. So do you think farm mechanization companies can play a larger role in terms of putting those or any kind of ecosystem that can come to the table as food chain partnerships and see this transformation journey happening, working with the government and the farming community to look at further enhancement or diversification?
Okay, I think just to correct this, I don't think this is an area where a farm mechanization can change this. See, the reason, if you really know why Punjab and Haryana has not moved out, because somebody has promised them that they will buy 80% of the produce. No reason for them to plant anything else. Okay, so that attitude, mindset need to change. But there is something beyond that I want to talk to you. I mean, I think I'm really taking the Hemendra's point on need to partner. I mean, every farmer need to think that I'm part of that. And what I don't understand is, I don't think you should blame center. Every state can actually create this without talking. I'll give you an example of Amul. How did Amul come about? Amul was not, they were buying milk, and today they are strong because the kind of products that they brought out. Initially they catered to Gujarat, then they slowly went out and started catering to India and then to globe. So the question, what I never understood it, why can't the state create cooperative agencies, not just buying? The problem in an MSP culture is you buy and you buy because you have to buy, and then you allow it to rot. What I think the states need to do is create an Amul kind of a system with respect to agriculture. You buy to convert, you buy to process, you buy to value add, you buy to create a brand for that. Like Amul did. Amul created a brand because of the sheer one man pushed it. That's the reality of life. So you need that kind of a person to push it. Imagine if that can be done. Imagine that suppose somebody from Tamil Nadu says, I'm going to do this and I'm going to buy all the millets which grows in a big way in Tamil Nadu. I'm going to create it and I'm going to create a process industry. I'm going to tell farmers, you grow millet, I'm willing to buy from you and this is the guaranteed prices. I'm going to convert millet, I'm going to process it and keep it. I'm going to give it to India, give it to the world tomorrow. That will change the farmers. I think so. The question is, then the farmer will feel that I'm part of that ecosystem. Exactly what Hemendra said. I think that's what we are missing. You cannot keep him at hand's length and say, oh, I will take, you give it to me, then what I do is my problem, and I'm going to negotiate it with you for the best price. Is not the solution. And the sad thing is, it is there on the table. Amul's all success stories, and every state recreated an Amul story. And every state has got the milk processing, conversion, and selling, and everybody is competing. I wish somebody comes out in the one state to say that I can also do this in agriculture, other agricultural produce. You will find a complete change, a complete metamorphosis into something else. That's all I can say. Otherwise, you can go on blaming everybody, saying that you're not doing, I'm not doing. End game is, it's there within the current rules and regulations. You can still do it.
Yeah. Thanks, Keshav. Parul, last question to you. This one. So till now, the agri startup ecosystem doesn't have a good or a regulatory framework, right? So it's there, but it's not in a form and shape which will. So do you want this environment or a regulatory environment? How do you want the balance to happen to make you grow?
For us, we definitely need drones, as we all know. Like there are a lot of regulations around it. At least now there are policies coming up for the agriculture. Now, for the drone sector, already policies have come up. But especially for the agriculture, where you can spray and all the policies are coming up. FICCI is the main part. Then we have DFI, Drone Federation of India. So there are other councils DGCA is also involved in this. So definitely policies are coming up, and it will help us a lot. Because people are very scared to use drones as of now. They'll think that if something happens, it will be on them. And if definitely there is no other. I think if I'll talk about 3-4 months prior to now, so there were no insurance policies. Now policies are also coming up on the insurance front. So definitely we need regulated environment. We need a lot of policies around the agri sector where as Mr. Keswan and Mr. Hemendra has already mentioned, farmers should be involved in all the processes, not just sowing the seeds and giving us the crop, giving us the yield. So once they are involved, they'll also think that, like he has already mentioned, they're a part of ecosystem. Then maybe we'll get more. Now the motivation level over here in the farmers, it's very low. When I have worked on ground for almost 4 months. I was there in Tamil Nadu, I was there in Andhra. So the motivation level, it's very low because the cost they are getting, what they are sowing. Like if I'll talk about the rice, simple rice, which is sold at around 100-120 bucks in India, the cost they are getting is around 40 bucks per kg. So that gap we need to fill. For that, we need a lot of regulations, a lot of policies around it.
Thank you, Parul. Thank you. John, you want to come in? Yeah.
Yes, all I would say is that I certainly appreciate the need for regulation around, say, for example, safety of drones, application of application of insecticides, for example, and maybe if I just use the screen as a tool. But over the last 30 or 40 years, Australian regulation of agriculture has gone down like that. But as a result, our productivity, our competitiveness has gone up like that. And also what probably has gone up has been our increase in regulation around ensuring good custodianship of the land, the environment, and also ensuring that we meet market demands for products when we export them overseas. But this journey, in terms of the deregulation of agriculture, was hard. But as a result, we've actually been able to experience almost 30 years of uninterrupted economic growth. And we are now trying to target $100 billion in agricultural output by 2030. And we would not have been able to get there if the regulation of our agricultural system was like that. So I would probably just say that in terms of encouraging innovation, we need to ensure that there's a proper role for government in setting the policy parameters, but then allowing business and farmers to make the decisions which are in their best interests.
Thank you, John. I think with that, I think we can wrap up this session. I think it has been a great interactive session with you guys, and a lot of thoughts that have come in. I think the Agritech ecosystem is going to stay. I think we'll see a lot of traction, and we'll see them enabling the transformation that we all anticipate to happen in agriculture, with the hope of they playing a larger role, with a moderated regulatory environment, with more collaborative partnerships across the value chain, and we'll see that lot of participation in the future to make this happen, and then lot of cross-border Agritech ecosystem knowledge that we need to look at between India and Australia, India and New Zealand, India and other countries wherever the maturity is there, to see that the transition happens much faster than what we are currently anticipating. With that, I think thank you, gentlemen. You guys have been extraordinary in terms of sharing your knowledge, and I think all the participants who were there, so all the audience would have actually gained a lot from this interaction. Thank you so much. With that, I will transfer to the host, and we can wrap this up. Thank you so much.
Thank you all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We share the light. We share the land. We share this journey. Join us for the adventure. Our country is waiting for you.